Hello, YouTube. So I see that that Bionic Dance posted another video about atheist babies, and I think it's kind of a stupid conversation, but nonetheless, I thought it would be fun to make a video, if anything. Um, uh, First of all, my position is that no, babies aren't atheists. Um, but and but I want to elaborate what I mean. Um, Let me start with the whole what I think of as the non-stamp collector argument, right? We shouldn't. That is, you know, non-stamp collectors don't get together and talk about how they don't collect stamps and such like this. The idea being that the word itself is superfluous because we don't define ourselves by negatives, and I don't think that this works actually. I think that it makes perfect sense to define yourself as a negative, um, provided that the positive that you're negating is hegemonic, right? So it makes perfect sense to define yourself as an atheist in a world where people are predominantly theists, right? Um, in the same way, the parallel would be the anarchists, right? It makes perfect sense for them to label themselves as anarchists in a world where people believe in governments, right? But in a world where people didn't believe in governments, we wouldn't have the word anarchist, right? And in the same way, in a world where nobody believed in gods, we wouldn't have the word atheist, right? It would be a sort of incoherent term. So that's my critique of the non-stamp collector position. Is that it assumes that these labels don't fit into the world, right? But because they make sense, the very fact that the word atheist makes sense, it means something. It means that the prefix "a," right? It's negating theist, right? Not theist, non-believer, right? And I think that the position that babies are atheists doesn't take into account that the word is a negation of something. So if theist isn't there, then you can't negate it. So I think that on a more compact level, on the level of the human mind, right? If the concept of theism is not present, right? It doesn't matter if doesn't matter if you've studied the evidence and rejected it. Therefore, it doesn't matter if you, or maybe you just grew up and never really, were terribly involved in it or something like that. Maybe you weren't quite raised that way. It doesn't really matter how strong it is. The word only makes sense if you assume that the thing that you're negating is present. And atheist, non-believer, right? Like, these are both negations. Even the statement "believe in zero gods" assumes that there's a potentiality of gods that could be believed in. There is no way to define the atheist position without defining it as a negation of the theist position, because that's what it is. It's a negation. So if we are to assume that the baby is something of a blank slate, right? I'm not sure. It's possible that babies might have some. It's possible that they could have a proto-theism in that they view their parents, and then that becomes extrapolated out and becomes something like a God concept. I'm not sure about how the developmental psychology actually works, but if we were to assume that babies are something of a blank slate, then it actually just doesn't make sense to, there's nothing to negate, right? In that mindset, if the concept of theism is not there, the word atheism loses its meaning, in the same way that if we lived in a world where nobody had ever conceived of a god, the word atheist wouldn't make sense either. Now, you can say that, well, babies are in the world too, and therefore they don't believe in gods, so therefore they're atheists. You could say that, but the problem with that is that, well, it doesn't actually work. All sorts of things are in the world. For instance, let's say there was a tribe that had no God concept. The word atheist would be meaningless, right? Imagine trying to explain what an atheist was to some tribe that had no conception of a god. It wouldn't function. I mean, the word doesn't function. It ceases to be useful in that context. So in the same way, like, there's no position without the theism to negate. There is no position to be articulated, and if no position to be articulated, then there simply is no position. So that's my conclusion. It's the words actually become meaningless in that context, for all sorts of non-stamp collector-esque reasons. I mean, really the only way that you could conceive of babies being atheists is if you have the idea that words function without any context. That's what you would have to, you would have to assume that words get their meaning from something other than context, right? You'd be in some kind of weird Platonic situation, right? The word atheist means because, there is some notion of atheism that is apart from context, and apart from the use of the word atheism. And obviously that work. So yeah, the real fallacy here is that this relies on a Platonic conception of language. And yeah, that's my opinion on why babies aren't atheists.